Mesdames, Messieurs, dear colleagues, dear friends, it's my pleasure and my honor to welcome you to this seminar entitled HTA sans frontières, meaning without borders. And I think that the topics and the date of this meeting are very important for at least three reasons. The first is a general economic context, which actually is the same for all European countries. You all know that innovation is back in the field of pharmaceuticals and always very active in the fields of medical devices. With regard to drugs, a number of new products have recently been approved or will be soon approved, in particular in the field of virology, oncology and hematology, and rare diseases. On one hand, it's excellent news for the patients. In some diseases, this will dramatically improve prognosis and will change patient management. On the other hand, these agents are very expensive, and some of them will be prescribed to a large number of patients, which will have a huge budget impact. Take, for example, sofosbuvir and other anti-hepatitis C agents, or anti-PD-1 and PD-L1, which opened the era of immuno-oncology this year. The cost of these innovations raise major concerns regarding equal access for all patients and regarding long-term sustainability of healthcare system. We all understand that research and development costs are increasing, and that the cost of previous failures and of studies for future indication have to be taken into account in the price of new drugs. We also understand that when the added clinical benefit induced by a new agent is major, or when it induces significant changes in clinical practice, this may justify a higher price than its comparators. We all know that most companies invest at least part of their benefits in further research, and that the life sciences industry is a major driver for innovation, clinical research, and last but not least, for economy and employment. However, pharmaceutical companies should not push too far when seeking for a rapid return on investment for their shareholders. They should propose fair prices, taking into account not only their economic objectives, but also the general economic context. This situation also means that HTA bodies should provide payers with clear and reproducible advices and help them for decide just prices. However, it's worth noting that the cost of drugs is not only related to their price, but also to prescription volumes. Efforts should also be made by physicians to prescribe according to clinical guidelines and to avoid overuse. Finally, one may consider that the proportion of drug cost in Europe is only 15 to 18% of the overall health expenditures, and that it is that in an attempt to control this health expenditure in the context of economic constraints, health authorities should also accelerate their programs for facilitating patient pathways organization and health professional coordination in order to avoid redundant procedures or undue hospitalizations. The second reason is the European context of cooperation for health technology assessment. European countries have different healthcare systems, different health priorities, and different economic resources. Therefore, drug appraisal for reimbursement and pricing decisions may vary across countries. However, assessment of a new drug's added value compared to existing therapies should be common, or at least should follow the same rules. That is the reason why European HTA agencies have decided to work together and have formed the European Network for HTA. UNETA has already succeeded in harmonizing some of the assessment procedures through the programs of the Joint Action 2. Now it is time to reinforce this cooperation and to establish the solid foundation for a permanent European network. To this end, the European Commission has accepted to fund a Joint Action 3 starting in 2016, which will allow not only to continue the ongoing programs, but also to start new projects. HTA needs cooperation from HTA doers. It needs also to be supported by European funded research projects in order to help the HTA community to overcome the various methodological challenges that are faced when assessing health intervention. I'm very happy that this forum gives the possibility to 4 projects that were funded by FP7, the European Union's Research and Innovation Funding Program, to present their main results. I'm sure that the discussions on the result of these programs today will be both lively and useful for each of you. The third reason is more French. It is that this meeting coincides with the 10th anniversary of the HAS, Haute, Autorité de santé, and this is the occasion for me, as chairman of the HAS board, to underline our involvement in European HTA cooperation during the last 5 years, despite some resource limitation due economic constraints. Not only we did participate in all meetings and in all programs, but also we played a major role in some of UNETA deliverables, such as the 9 first guidelines on the assessment of relative effectiveness of drugs, and played an active role in others, such as the first joint assessment reports. Or most importantly, we were the work package leader in the pilot program on early dialogues, which was followed by the HAS-led SEED program, which will be presented this morning by François Meyer. As some of you may be aware, I will leave HAS soon, and I would like to take the opportunity of this meeting first to thank the UNETA partners with which we had excellent cooperation, and especially thank Finn Borlum Christensen, who has been the president or the coordinator of this group from the very beginning, and who succeeded in making all these teams work together. Secondly, to thank my co-workers who have participated in UNETA's development and contributed to providing HAS an international position. In particular, Mira Pavlovic, whom many of you know, and mostly François Meyer, who is a brilliant and friendly co-worker and has been a perfect ambassador of HAS. He knows that I have always trusted him, and I consider that nothing would have been possible without him. Thirdly, I'd like to strongly assure on behalf of the HAS College that participation in European projects will remain an important objective for HAS in the future. I do hope that we will keep a leading position, especially in the field of early dialogues, which I believe remains a priority objective, but also in the field of additional evidence generation, which may become even more frequent, even more important if rapid drug developments become more frequent. And I'm pretty confident that Mrs. Marisol Touraine, Minister of Health in France, who will close this morning's session, will confirm that European cooperation for HTA is necessary and that France and HAS should play a major role in this cooperation. Finally, I'd like to thank the European Commission and especially Andrzej Rich, who is a Director of Health System and Product, and Jérôme Böhm and all their co-workers for co-organizing this meeting and mostly for accepting to fund the Joint Action 3. I would like to thank you all for your participation in this seminar, and especially those of you who have traveled from other countries for this occasion. I wish you a fruitful working day. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Andrzej Rich, Director of Health System and Products at the European Community. Andrzej.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, chers colleagues from AGES, chers Jean-Luc. You know, it's showing the leadership when the boss is not forgetting, you know, his people. And I really love the moment when I hear, you know, so many names I know from my almost daily work on HTA project. And people, they deserve, you know, not just mentioned, but they really deserve, you know, the reputation of this organization, you know, across not just Europe but the world. So I think it's a honor to be with you here today. You know, HTA, as Jean-Luc said, is quite complex and challenging area of development. HIS played a very important role during this last 10 years. By chance, you know, it seems like we are celebrating this 10 years in Paris. We have 10 years of UNETA in the form of projects and joint actions. We have, I am 10 years in the Commission, so I also feel my celebration as well here. When the SEED project was started, again, organization HIS showed that we can do. I mean, I remember the beginning was we can't, and I think you were able to bring team together, people from many European HTA bodies, and show the options we can. And I think this is something we should not forget, because, you know, without people, without courage, you know, this will not happen. Of course, early dialogues, they have this tension inside the system that HTA bodies, they don't like feel be independent, not independent, so they don't like to be seen as a co-developer of the technologies. But at the same time, there's a call from HTA bodies to deliver adequate clinical data, and there's also a call from patients, and today we will hear voice of patients to get access to technology. They are really innovative. They really bring value to patients. And those issues, I think, the tension, the development of early dialogue will be discussed in the panel in few seconds. Of course, the methodological challenges around HTA, they are enormous. Yesterday, we discussed in the HTA network meeting about the medical devices field, how we can improve our work in this field, and how we can assess complex technologies. Last year in Rome, this was discussion about assessment of e-health and telemedicine, again, challenging area of development. So it's true that without investment from number of projects and universities who are also here today, clever scientists, it will be not possible to develop so fast in this field. Of course, 10 years, somebody will say, okay, it's a long way. Maybe we are too slow. Others say we are too quick. So maybe also you should reflect this today about the speed we are moving. What is the European cooperation in this field? We started already in the 90s. There were a number of research projects funded this time. I remember also this moment because I was involved in my university time in this development, and I remember how I don't think even we are able to imagine this debate we are having today. This is what I said yesterday. We also should be proud about the things that happen above our imagination, and I think it's important to still dream and imagine things. So I think it's especially for colleagues working in the research field, we really call for imagination, and we should do more trying to understand better this discipline, this multidisciplinary effort we are taking together. Joint Action 2, as Jean-Luc said, is slowly getting to the end. We are preparing the launch of Joint Action 3. And again, it's showed that member states can work together. If you see the size of this operation, over 60 organizations in network, working together and trying to build, the European model, it's also showing that this is really European work, European job. We also try to help with additional resources from the biggest public-private funds, Innovative Medicine Initiative, to help stakeholders, patients, providers, payers, and industry to develop also work in this field. And yesterday, a representative of providers, she said something which I think I should share here today. She said, how difficult it is to understand what you are doing. She said when she she came to the first meeting, she understood 10% of language we use. So I think there's also a call for better communication. We should find a way to explain, what and how we are doing our work. What challenges we are facing? Of course, the governance, the contents, the substance of European cooperation. This is something we try to steer from the HTA network. We discuss multi-annual planning. We try to see the picture, the map. Yesterday, we tried to define where we are on this map, where we are in our road. Early dialogue will be still important part of development. Evidence generation, this is already mentioned as a priority by Jean-Luc. But of course, there's important the reuse and joint work by national HTA authorities. I think it's important that we use what we are producing. We don't waste our resources to replicate too many things. We have to find a system, and we are doing this, experimenting how to do better. But of course, at the same time, when we increase the production, we should make sure the quality is there, and we should also think how to help to make this area of development professional, how we should employ more universities in the teaching programs, try to also make sure that there's enough resources when someone is living for an organization, and many of them, they are not big. People are taking whole knowledge with them. Yesterday, one colleague said 2 people left, but the team is 15 people, so 20% of resources, valuable resources left, and you don't find them easily on the local, national markets. So, what is also important, the scope of work. So, as mentioned, we don't like to stop on pharmaceuticals, which is most developed field, but we also would like to enlarge our work and continue enlarge work in medical devices field, in the complex interventions, because they most probably the methodologically and also from financial point of view most finance challenging areas. Let me conclude. Most probably you have here this week, Commission decided to put forward more activities in this field. The Commission work program was agreed this week, and HTA is one of the priority for the Commission as whole to be continue to develop, and we have to see what we can reach in next year and years to come. As was rightly said by Jean-Luc, we have to really reach 2020 with a sustainable system when everybody knows the rules, the place, and we are able to develop things together. And finally, HTA is not only multidisciplinary activity, but it's also multi-stakeholder effort. So I think this conference is an example, and thank you very much. You brought, academia, industry, HTA bodies together here today, and patients, and we can really speak and debate in France this important issue. And Paris is magic city, and I said yesterday, in Rome we were able to build our strategy for HTA, and I'm still looking, for the name of our product of this conference today. And don't forget, it was said here in Paris, we can. It's not only Obama.
And now it's my great pleasure to introduce Professor Alain Fischer, who used to be a professor of pediatrics, but involved in immunology. He's now professor at Collège de France and president of the Institut Imagine. He will deliver a lecture on innovation and research in healthcare.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Jean-Luc called me a few weeks ago to ask me whether I would like to give a conference as an introduction to your day of work. Well, I said yes, and then I realized this is a kind of a challenge. This is obviously not my direct field in which I'm involved, so I will try to discuss with you some aspects, if the slides can go on. Yes, they were too quick. All right. I'd like to discuss what is written as the title of my talk, Advances in Medicine in terms of opportunities, and you know very well that there are a lot of opportunities these days, and to discuss with you some necessary conditions, at least seen on the academic side of innovation. Obviously, there is a very important one, which is industry, but I have no competency at all to discuss the industry side. So advances in healthcare, things have changed absolutely in an incredible manner over the last 50, 60 years. I think really the word is real. There has been a revolution since, I would say, up to when a man existed, so in the prehistory era. Up to 1950, medicine was essentially pragmatic, with little science, at least in the way we consider what science is today. And then it changed. It changed, to my opinion, because of major developments in 4 areas, not directly for some of them related to biology and medicine, but just to mention, of course, this is my personal view and everyone can disagree with it. Epidemiology is obviously a key element that has determined many advances in medicine, that's for sure. It doesn't need to be much explained. Physics. Physics is going to continue to play a major role in medicine. If you just think about the development of imaging, everyone is working today in hospitals by using MRI. And I remember I was a resident 40 years ago, all of these things were not existing and medicine was very difficult. And I'm sure this is not the end. And not only we can look at the body in great details, but in the labs we can look at very great details in cells. We can look at single molecule, how they behave in cells, and this is helping us very much to understand biology and also, of course, the pathophysiology of diseases. Then obviously molecular biology, DNA, genomics, but not only the genetic aspects, all of the aspects of molecular biology, if you think of what is going on in the development of understanding the content in proteins, lipids, other metabolites in cells and in the body. This is obviously of tremendous help in understanding diseases, and obviously chemistry, that's for sure, at least in the development of drugs. So these are the major advances. And these turned out to have an effect. I hope you will be able to see a few figures I'm just showing you, which are good news, not only good news, but the good news, I think this is extremely impressive, is that within the last 15 years or so, based on a study that has just been, in August, been published by The Lancet, with terrific epidemiological data worldwide. So I circled France, but this is the data are very similar in other European countries and globally in the Western world. There has been advances in terms of, as you know, everybody knows that in the longevity, but also, and this is not less, this is much less well known, in the longevity in good health. Let's consider for France as an example. In green are male and in red are female. Let's consider first the male for once. I hope I'm not wrong because I can't read anymore from here. But in any case, if you look at the different columns, from I think the first one is 1990, then it goes to a few more years later, and then to 2013, you can read that there has been an increase of between 3 and 4 years in terms of longevity in good health. In 15 years. This is absolutely remarkable, and it is true also for the other gender, so that globally we can tell today that overall the chance of being in good health has increased by 3 to 4 years in 15 years. This is absolutely fantastic, I think. This is really now, over the last years, consequences in the advances in medicine. Of course, the bad news associated with the good news are first that there are very significant remaining social inequalities. This is the case in France. I know it is also the case in other European countries, so that's a challenge. And the other bad news, now on a more medical point of view, that is, as you know very well, the same studies have shown that there is also an increased frequency of chronic conditions associated with a longer longevity. Here is, you can see the number for both genders, the number of chronic conditions found on average in the population as a function of age. So if you look at the population of my age, so somewhere between 60 and 70, we have on average something like 5 or 6 chronic conditions. So obviously this is affecting healthcare, and there is a lot of unmet medical needs in taking care of these many conditions associated with elderly. And this is of course a challenge for the future. There are many unresolved health issues related to elderly, but also, for instance, to genetic diseases, my field, and obviously back to elderly, such as a major example, neurodegenerative diseases, where today there are virtually no treatment available. And if we want to advance, we have to face complexity, I'm afraid to say, because biology is complex, medicine is complex, and human beings are complex. Just to fix a few figures that illustrate complexity, starting with hard biology, and we'll go up to humankind and behavior. So we have, as you know very well, approximately 20,000 genes in our genome. There are, for every single cell, several thousands of these genes that are expressed at a given time point. There are many regulatory elements in the genome that are controlling the network of gene expression, at least 1 million. So just imagine the complexity of the networks. There are many regulatory, for instance, RNA molecules, 11 classes at least that are involved in regulation. And of course, these genes are encoding for many proteins. There are more proteins than genes because there may be different products as a function of different regulatory elements. Now, if we move to cells, in our body, we have something like 1/10 to the 13 cells, which is quite a lot, in 200 cell types. And these cells are, some of them are dividing, and dividing extensively, so with the risk of course, somatic mutations and cancer, for instance. It is estimated that every day there are 1/10 to the 12 cell division cycles per day in a human being. This is just unbelievable. If you look to our environment, we are not alone. We are living usually in a friendly manner with bacteria and viruses. We know today from microbiota studies that there are at least 10 to the 14th bacteria in our gut, so more bacteria than cells in our body. Think about that. And even more viruses. Even more viruses. There are viruses on the skin as well as bacteria, actually, in the gut, but also even in our blood. There are permanently non-pathogenic viruses that are circulating. So we are living normally in a good symbiosis with these microorganisms, but of course this can be disrupted in diseases, and this has to be understood. And then, of course, there is a variable environment with toxics and many elements that may influence health. And finally, we are living now something like 80 years, so there is the time frame per se is affecting biology and medicine. And of course, human behavior is not fully driven by our genes, by far. And of course, this is true as a single individual, and it is also true as a society. And this has to be taken into account in the complexity of healthcare. So I'm sorry to tell you, we all have to be aware that we are facing major complexity in trying to understand and, of course, more importantly, treat diseases based on these many elements and many others. Just to illustrate human behavior, I like to remember the situation of vaccination. When Jenner in the UK started to protect people against smallpox by using vaccine, and this was a very smart idea, he was viewed as a completely mad guy. So this is shown from this picture, which has been drawn in 1796. So he's sitting somewhere in the middle of the drawing, and you can see the people waiting on the left-hand side for vaccination, and those who have been vaccinated on the right-hand side, and they are becoming more or less cows, as you can see. So obviously this cartoon was made in order to criticize and prevent people to be vaccinated. I'm not sure that today we have completely escaped from such behaviors. And even with the very last days, you can find in the media, I'm sure this is the case in France, I'm sure it is the case in other European countries, there is still major prevention against some vaccines at least, and this is an issue, and this is an issue we are not going to solve by biology, but by social and human sciences studies. So this is also front-facing us. Okay, back to what's going on. I think what has been extremely fruitful over the last 20, 30 years is a reductionist approach of biology and medicine, that is to try to solve rather simple problems where one single target could be recognized and could be, in some cases, targeted for treatment efficiently of diseases. A few examples you know very well, because of course you have been evaluating these drugs. From the 90s have been the tremendous development of monoclonal antibodies. So now that was the first time chemicals were not the only single drugs be used in patients. And as you know very well, the development of treatment for inflammatory and autoimmune diseases, not exclusively, but this is an example, has been initiated now for 25 years with major successes, although there are room for improvement, as for the treatment of Crohn's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, and I think the very first example was the usage of anti-TNF antibodies and reagents, and this is not the end. You know that there are many monoclonal antibodies and other biologicals that are being developed for such diseases, and this is a major advance that has been based on very basic study in immunology. Another example that has been mentioned by Jean-Luc already, obviously, and is a fantastic success of biology and medicine over the last 20 years, is the development of drugs that are able to control HIV infection, and even better, to cure HCV infection. And I think this is fantastic. And again, this has been based on very solid basic biology studies. Another example in the cancer field, and a very famous one, is the treatment of chronic myelogenic leukemia with BCR-ABL inhibitor. And from that very first example, as you know very well, many other kinase inhibitors have been developed, are being developed to treat other cancers. So it's another very major field of success. And the last one I'd like to mention, also mentioned by Jean-Luc, an obvious one, everybody knows about it, but I think this is well deserved, is the emergence of immunotherapy in cancer by blocking the brakes of immunoresponses with regions targeting PD-1, PD-L1, CTLA-4, and many others that are coming. I'm sure you will see coming to your agencies many other similar products and combination of these products over the next years. And these are major advances. Of course, this is not solving all of the issues, but these are advances. I'd like to stress my field, sorry to talk about what I know better, which is the field of rare diseases. Where most of the rare diseases are inherited with monogenic inheritance. There are thousands of them. And there are obviously an ideal way in medicine where reductionists can be applied, since the disease is caused, usually, by mutation in a single gene. So you can think of something simpler. And today, I mean, there has been significant advances based essentially on genomic studies, with more than 3,000 genes, mutations of which are causing such rare diseases have been identified. This has helped to develop diagnostic tools based essentially of next-generation sequencing, which is now entering medicine, not only for rare diseases, also for cancer, obviously. But the different approach we have today to sequence the exome, to sequence the whole genome, become useful in medicine, not only in research. And this is leading to advances, I'm not going to go into too many details, but in genetic counseling, in few targeted therapeutics, I will mention that, and I think this is very important, I will try to illustrate it. In a few cases, the study of rare diseases, the identification of the target for treatment, has led to, or is leading to potential development of treatment for more common diseases. There is one example I'm sure you know very well, because it is very much in the area today of evaluation, which is the targeting of the so-called PCSK9 molecule. I remind you that that molecule is degrading LDL receptor, and that the more it is active, the more bad cholesterol you have in your blood, so the more likely you are to get bad vascular diseases. And there are a few very rare individuals who have mutations in that gene, and those individuals are at reduced risk of developing cardiovascular diseases. So from that understanding of the role of PCSK9 molecule, based on the study of rare patients, of course, today there are major developments in developing inhibitory drugs and antibodies or drugs that will block PCSK9 in a way to reduce cholesterol level and reduce cardiovascular risk. I know this is still a challenging issue and in terms of what are the indications, what should be the price, and so on, but scientifically based, I think this is a very solid advance, and this advanced is based on the study of very rare diseases. That's why I'm mentioning it. Now I'd like to mention an example of something which is ongoing from my own work and the work of my institute in immunology. So just a little bit of immunology here. So when a lymphocyte, a circle on this slide, is activated during an infection, say a viral infection, these cells will proliferate tremendously. Tremendously means with a division time of 6 hours for many days. So you calculate a few cells can generate hundreds of millions of cells, and there are effector cells and that will control the infection, that's for sure. The process of proliferation needs to synthesize nucleotides, deoxynucleotides, to synthesize DNA, it makes sense. And the most key regulated nucleotide involved in DNA synthesis in lymphocytes as well as in other cells is deoxy-CTP, deoxycytidine triphosphate, and there is an enzyme named CTPS1, which is key in deoxy is upregulated in lymphocytes at the time of activation. And that in a very rare disease, so this is again what I want to mention. Sorry, I went once. All right, there is a very rare disease, 10 patients worldwide, extremely rare, where this enzyme CTPS1 is defective. So those patients have lymphocytes that are unable or very poorly able to proliferate and have a severe immunodeficiency. So this led to the idea that if one is able to target CTPS1 by a drug, we may specifically inhibit in an antigen-specific manner the activation of T lymphocytes as well as B lymphocytes. So it would be a tremendous target to treat any pathological immune responses, such as autoimmunity, graft versus host disease, or graft rejection. So this is a project which is presently being implemented by a startup company, but I don't know whether it's going to be successful, likely no, but at least it's an example where we can try to derive new therapeutics for rare diseases. And also, the field of rare diseases is a field where new therapeutics have been invented, just like based on my field, illustrate that. Almost 50 years ago was the first attempt and success of what we call allogenic bone marrow transplantation, or allogenic hematopoietic stem cell transplantation. You know that these transplantations are performed worldwide in 10,000 of cases these days to treat patients with leukemias, other malignancies, as well as other diseases. But this started with the treatment of a very rare disease, which is an inherited immunodeficiency. That is a disease where the cells at the top of this cartoon, which is showing hematopoiesis, so the development of the different blood cells. So the T lymphocytes are absent. There is a group of very rare disorders named severe combined immunodeficiencies, 1 in 50,000 live births, so very rare, where these T lymphocytes are absent, and patients born without T lymphocytes are dying from infections within the next months after birth. So in 1968, Bob Good in the US thought of using bone marrow transplantation to cure a T-cell immunodeficiency, a severe combined immunodeficiency, in a setting where a child had an HLA identical brother. That was the time where HLA typing became available, so major scientific breakthrough. And he reasoned that because it was known that hematopoietic stem cells can give rise to lymphocytes, and that this patient has no way to reject a graft because he had no immune system, essentially, this could work. And it worked. And since then, these diseases have been treated by stem cell transplantation, but also, as I said, many other ones. So this is a good example where a new therapy, allogenic bone marrow transplantation, started with the treatment of an extremely rare disease and now has developed to treat many more. Perhaps today, we'll see, the same thing will happen with gene therapy. And again, it started with the very same diseases because for the same reasons of severity and the fact that, by the way, allogenic bone marrow transplantation does not cure all of the patients. Those who don't have a good match donor are at higher risk of complications. So we and others developed what we call ex vivo gene therapy of severe combined immunodeficiency based on the injection of a virus into hematopoietic stem cells. And the cells, once infected with the virus, are injected back to the patient, as you can see here, and more detail here. So we are using retroviruses. I will not go into details, but these retroviruses are helping to have the gene, the correct gene, to be inserted into chromosomes and so that the gene can be replicated and expressed in daughter cells such as lymphocytes. So these are started in 1999, and now after some difficulties, it seems to be efficient. So I'm sure you will see, and you have already seen, I guess, some, I know at least in 1 or 2 cases, some gene therapy trials coming for evaluation to agencies for further for potential marketing. This has been now efficient, at least in 3 forms of immunodeficiencies, with more than 120 patients worldwide living thanks to gene therapy. Of course, there were difficulties, but progressively these difficulties are being solved. And the field is now moving to treat patients with genetic disorders of hemoglobin, like beta thalassemia and sickle cell disease, that are much more frequent, and many more diseases. I will not go into detail, but you know that the field is now moving to treat cancer by engineering lymphocytes, the so-called CAR T cells, to treat several leukemias or lymphomas with obvious successes, despite some difficulties. And the field is also moving to the treatment of genetic disease of the eye, of the liver, and many others. And one product, as you know better than me, has been already marketed. So this is coming, and this will be developed in the next years. And also, this is associated with development of new strategies. In the diverse, now 2 concepts that are important, I'm sure you know, but to mention is that obviously compared to 30 or 40 years ago, the field of medicine and therapeutics has been enriched and diversified. In addition to chemicals, biotherapies have emerged, and I mentioned briefly monoclonal antibodies, but also cell and gene therapy, just mentioned, and of course there are many more possibilities in the futures. Medical devices, prosthesis, ergonomic engineering are all elements you are going to evaluate in your agencies in the next years. And so the diversification probably is going to, it's a good thing, of course, but also providing some difficulties in analysis. And also in surgery, there are major advances like mini-invasive surgery based on 3D imaging guided surgery, which I think you will have to evaluate too. So this is an important concept, diversification of products and strategies. And the second important concept, which is, of course, everyone knows about, is the development of precision medicine beyond reductionism, that in order to try to get a more global view of the patient health and to use that information to treat patients. So what are the fields in which really this is going to have an impact? My personal view is to consider that the genomics in terms of high throughput and high speed diagnosis of inherited diseases, that's for sure. Pharmacogenomics is going to be developed and is being developed with very interesting studies, so to adapt treatment for many diseases. And obviously the field of somatic mutation in cancer and treatment adaptation based on the pattern of somatic mutations is a field which is fastly growing and will be extremely important in making more precise the way patients with cancer will be treated. Would it be more than that? I'm not sure. Also, some people are claiming there will be more. At least in the short term, I'm not seeing major other applications in the field of medicine. But this is, of course, only my opinion. Okay, now for the few minutes left, not much, but I will try to briefly discuss innovation now, the conditions required for innovation. How to make it optimally working. There is the industry side I'm not going to discuss. I'd like to briefly discuss the academic side. How can we do better in our area to develop innovation based on this research? Well, I think on the academic side, we need first a very strong support to basic research. And I have to say at the European level, the European Research Council program is absolutely terrific. And I hope it will persist. And not only that it will persist, but it will develop. I think this is in Europe a major asset we have to develop the best possible research globally as well as in medicine. But then we need medical research institutes to do translational research, because today we need to have at the same place the way to have access to patients, so to develop patient cohorts and to develop databases, the data warehouse, databases, capacity of data mining, and of course you know this is becoming extremely important. At the same place, we need to have both basic and experimental research and the platforms that are going together with this. So in order to have, at the same place, integrated medical research institutes, optimally placed in hospital for obvious reasons, where research and training can be made, can be developed, and that these institutes can be visible, attractive for young scientists and doctors to come to work there. And I think the European collaboration between such institutes is absolutely important. And finally, these institutions are visible for the industry, and this is a way to facilitate interaction with industry. Just like to mention what has been done and what is being developed briefly in France. In France, and with the example of Paris, where the APHP stands for Assistance Publique des Hôpitaux de Paris, which is the hospital administration in Paris, 30 different hospitals. The connections between hospital, university, and research exists. There is a lot of course, of interactions. But there are 3 different entities, and this is not easy if you are working inside these 3 circles to cope with them. You have to spend a lot of time between these interactions. There has been a recent effort to try to ease, at least in some fields, the connection between healthcare, research, and teaching by developing so-called, is it coming? Not really. Yes, now it's coming. Institut Hospitalo-Universitaire, so Hospitalo-Universitaire Institute, that were developed based on an initiative in France by a big loan of the government 5 years ago. And 6 of them have been now created and are functioning in a way to ease the interaction between every aspect of healthcare, research, and teaching in a given field of medicine. And I have the chance to work in one. I'm the director of the so-called Imaging Institute, which is the Institute of Genetic Diseases at Necker Hospital, close to here, where we are trying to put together the forces in research. We have 350 people working in the building you can see here, together with the platforms, the clinical research platforms, and the clinical units, including clinical disease clinical reference centers for rare diseases. So it's a major asset to have everyone and everybody together and to develop projects. And I will skip that note to be too long. And now, after 5 years of existence of this institute, I will not go into too many details, but it works. I can tell you it works because, for instance, in terms of getting data from patients, we have been able to develop a database platform that is efficient. I will not go into details. To develop tools for diagnosis of many genetic diseases. And to our developing trials, we are doing twice more clinical trials that we were doing 5 years ago. So it's a demonstration that these kind of institutions may work. But still, it's complicated because there are such institutes in only 6 places in France, so there are many other places with such institutes do not exist. There is a lot to do. I know there are similar institutions working elsewhere in Europe, and they are, again, major assets. Can we do better? I think we can do better, and I will finish with that. There is in one country, I think they have achieved my dream, which is to fuse completely research, training, and healthcare. And I think this is the best possible situation for healthcare itself, for research, for training, as well as for innovation. And this is Holland. In Holland, there are 8 fully integrated university medical centers in the places you can see here. 8 of them now have worked for more than 12 years, if I'm not wrong. They have completely integrated all of the activities, the budget, and this is extremely successful. And I think everywhere else in Europe, we should think about this model, which I find extremely attracting. If you look, for instance, at the Shanghai classification with all of the pitfalls of that classification, all 8 UMCs in Holland are within the first 200 medical centers worldwide, and actually half of them are in the first 50. Whereas in France, for instance, there are only 6 among 30 in the first 200. Just a small country doing extremely well. I think this is an interesting model, and we should think about it in terms of how to develop care and research and thus innovation in Europe. So my conclusions are there are more opportunities than ever for development of medical progress, for reasons I mentioned. This is based on multiple and diversified scientific approaches. It needs a strong support to basic research. I will not go further in that, but this is key, and integrated academic medical research institutes. This will be, of course, for the future in terms of innovation and academic industry endeavor. And I guess your agencies, of course, this is a field in which I'm not familiar, have to adapt to these rapid ongoing modifications of the landscape of innovation. Thank you very much.